Hello, students, and welcome to VFR Flight Planning by wifiCFI. For our lesson objective today, it is to determine that you as a student have proficient knowledge of the elements related to navigation and flight planning. How to fill out this nav log, how to do all these math calculations, and how to put together a good, successful flight plan. We're going to be using the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. That's going to be our main source of information today. There's a whole bunch of other sources of information that go into VFR flight planning, and we reference a lot of other lessons on wifiCFI. A lot of weather lessons, a lot of performance lessons, those things. That's why we have the lessons laid out in the order that they're laid out in the ground school section of the course, right? You don't need to necessarily follow that order, but we put them in that order for a reason, because there are certain things in this lesson that will refer back to aviation theory, aviation weather reports, right? Performance and limitations, weight and balance, all that kind of different stuff. So just to let you know, we're going to be bringing those things up as we go throughout the lesson. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to talk about terms used in navigation, features on aeronautical charts, just a couple basic features. Remember, we've got a whole entire lesson on VFR chart symbology that goes into things in more detail. We're just kind of doing a surface level general type thing in this lesson here. Using current aeronautical charts, how to plot courses, what is pilotage and dead reckoning, how to use radio navigation, diversion to an alternate, loss procedures, computation of fuel consumption, using the nav log, the go no-go decision, and filing flight plans. Bunch of stuff, so it is going to be a little bit lengthier. At about 75 minutes between finishing up this video and then completing that quiz back on wifiCFI.com afterwards. Okay, for our lesson today, we are going to be using sectional charts quite a bit to plan out our entire VFR flight plan. So we need to know a little bit about the basics of them. We're not going to go really deep into the basics of these, these sectional charts that we're going to be using. If you want to know more about symbology on the sectional charts, you can go to our VFR chart symbology lesson. If you need to study up more on airspace, go to our National Airspace System lesson where we get really deep into those things. But we're going to do just a little surface, a 30,000 foot type view looking down on this real quick before we actually jump into creating the flight plan, making all of our calculations, and how we fill out our nav log. All right, so charts. They provide information that allow pilots to track their position and provide available information that enhances safety. There are 3 aeronautical charts that can be used by VFR pilots. You got the VFR sectional chart. This is the one that we're going to be using. This is probably the most common one. That's the chart scale 1 to 500,000, right? It provides information including airport data, navigational aids, airspace, topography. You don't need to worry about memorizing these chart scales or anything. Just know that the VFR sectional, that's kind of the main standard one. A terminal area chart, attack chart, is kind of like a zoomed in one for complicated airspace, usually used in or near Class Bravo airspace where there's a lot of details and they want to kind of give those details more space on the chart, and so they kind of zoom in on it, blow it up so you can see it a little bit better. And then you've got the WAC chart. This is the one that's zoomed way back out. Okay, this is useful for faster flying aircraft that need, they don't want to be going through all these charts trying to stick with their flight plan as they're flying along. So they zoom it out. They have a higher view of the world. They don't need as much detail because they're up cruising at higher altitudes and at faster speeds. Okay. VFR sectional chart. Again, we're just going to go over a couple of very basic things here, but we do have a full lesson on VFR chart symbology where we go into a lot more detail on all of these things. But this is land right here. Everything over here is land. If it's brown, right, it's land. Everything over here would be water. Water stuff is blue. Lighted areas are yellow. Like that is typically also means cities because usually big cities are lit, right? Towered airports, we got those right there. If they have a hard surface run rate greater than 8,069 feet, they'll look like this. If it's less, it'll be in a circle. If it's shorter than that, it'll be in a circle. Remember, towered airports are blue. Non-towered airports are magenta. Tick marks indicate fuel services. If there's no tick marks on it, like you see tick marks here on this blue airport, tick marks over on this magenta airport. If there are no fuel services, it'll just be smooth, no tick marks. Another non-towered airport. Again, this one's got the tick marks, so it's got fuel services. Towered airport. There we go. And towered airport with fuel services. We're just talking about runway lengths here, right? If it's 1,500 to 8,069 feet, it'll be in a circle, right? If it's more than 8,069 feet, it won't actually be in a circle. It'll be the drawn out runways. If it's a hard surface runway. Private airports, that's over here with the R's. Private airports are good for making VFR flight plans because they can be used as like visual checkpoints as we're flying along. Class Charlie airspace, right here. This is the thick magenta lines here. Again, if you want to learn a whole bunch about Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta Echo and Golf airspace, watch our National Airspace System lesson. Class Delta airspace is this one with the dashed blue line kind of going in a circle there. These are Victor Airways over here. These lines on the chart, Victor 441, Victor 198. They go to popular intersections. They go from BORs to BORs and make it easier for navigating. Obstructions, terrain, they look like that. We go over those in our VFR chart symbology. Lines of variation we will be using in this lesson after we talk about magnetic variation and what that is. MOA, these are military operating areas. Warning areas, again, see our airspace lesson. Here's our VOR compass rose, this big blue circle right here. We'll be using that a bit in our lesson today as well. Highest obstacle, maximum elevation figure right here, 800 feet. And remember, these are for the quadrants. You can see kind of these black lines in the background of the chart. And in each quadrant, they will publish one of these numbers. A big, kind of thick number, saying that the highest obstacle basically in that quadrant is 800 feet. These are good for emergency type situations. So if you get lost or you don't have great visibility outside, but you know that you're somewhere in this quadrant right here, that if you fly at least, or if you fly above 800 feet, you're not going to hit anything, man-made or natural. The highest obstacle is 800 feet. Okay. Wilderness areas, we talk about those in our airspace lesson, but yes, they are these solid blue lines with little dots on the inside of them. Airport stuff. Again, we get into more detail in the chart symbology lesson, but there's the airport name and the identifier. Here's the frequencies. You see Control Tower 118.3, ATIS 125.85, right? We've got our elevation of the airport in feet above mean sea level. Airport lighting, sunset to sunrise. Runway length, so this is the length of the longest runway, 10,000 feet. And then you got a Unicom frequency, 122.95 if you want to talk to Unicom. That's our airport beacon, that little star right there. This is some TAC stuff, right? This is like a TAC chart. You zoom in on it, and you can see we've got kind of complicated Class Bravo airspace right here. And there are a lot of different transitions that VFR pilots can take to go through, navigate through this airspace. ATC knows about them. You can know about them using these charts, and they can tell you what transitions to take, and then look at all this information they have about the transition, so you can read about it. And you do this before you went crossing through this busy Class Bravo airspace. All right. Then you and ATC would be on the same page, and you guys could navigate through here efficiently and safely. That's what TACs are for. It's highly important to make sure you are always using the most current chart for the area. So make sure that you've got the effective dates. You're in the correct time frame. Okay. If you're using like an iPad or you're using ForeFlight or these other navigation apps on, mobile devices and whatnot, make sure that you download the updates before you go and that the charts are up to date. If you're using paper charts, you've got effective dates and expiration dates right on the front of them. Okay, let's talk about pilotage and dead reckoning and what they are. You will get asked this at some point, for sure, in your flight training, whether it's on a stage check, written test, or on the check ride. What is pilotage? Pilotage is just navigating by reference to visible landmarks and checkpoints. You look out here, you say, here's the river. We're going to follow this river to the next checkpoint, which maybe it's a hill. We're going to go to the hill, and then we're going to turn. And then we're going to go to this until we're going to fly until we see this private airport. And then we're going to turn. All right. So it's just looking outside the window and flying from point to point using your eyes. Dead reckoning is a little bit different. The dead reckoning is navigating by computations of direction and distance from a known position and by using radio navigation aids. Essentially, it's time and distance calculations. That's what dead reckoning is. You say, all right, we're going to turn, we're going to fly this heading for so many minutes. Right? We're going to fly this heading for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Then we're going to turn and fly this heading for 4 minutes. Whatever it may be. I'm just making up numbers here. But in today's flight plan, and basically in all VFR flight plans that you create, you will be using a combination of both pilotage and dead reckoning. We're going to be picking out visual checkpoints, but we're also going to be doing the mathematical calculations from how do I get from here to here? What heading am I going to be flying? I need to be compensating for wind. What altitudes do I need to be at? What will be my time to get there? Time and route, all that kind of stuff is what we're going to do today. So completing the nav log. Today, we're just going to take a very short flight. All right. Our flight is going to go from Ogden, KOGD, to Tooele. These are two airports that are in Utah, and they're pretty close to each other. Flight plans can take a long time, especially if it is a long flight plan. So we're just going to do this very short one. It's really only, I think it's only two legs of the flight plan. But just know that you would do this same thing. You would just repeat the process over and over and over again for each different leg. All right, but we're not going to take the time to do a 2-hour flight plan here with you and just repeat the same information, continue regurgitating the same information over and over. So it's 2 legs. It's going to be nice and short. The other thing about this is with this flight plan, because these airports are so close to each other, we didn't do like a distance to climb chart. All right, like time, fuel, and distance to climb, like a top of climb or anything like that. We're only climbing up like 1,000 feet here in the flight plan, or maybe 1,500 feet. Maybe it's 2,000 feet. I don't remember. We're not going very high. It doesn't make that much of a difference in our flight plan as a whole. If you're going to be climbing quite, if you're doing a long climb, or a high climb, or whatever, or long descents from far out, you're losing a lot of altitude or climbing to very high altitudes. You're going to want to do your time, fuel, and distance. You're going to want to have your top of climbs and your top of descents. But again, it really doesn't make that much of a difference in this flight plan example, so we don't have it here. But we do talk about those charts and how to run all those charts in our performance and limitations lessons, where we go over all the performance charts. So we just want to put that out there for you as well. And here's the nav log that we're going to be using today. We're going to go over how to fill this whole thing in. The first step of doing a flight plan is to select our checkpoints or our fixes. Checkpoints should be prominent and easy to see from the airplane. Here we go. We're using pilotage like we just talked about. Don't pick checkpoints that are hard to find, right? You're flying along. You need to be paying attention to flying the airplane and navigating, right? Aviate, navigate, communicate. You need to be aviating and make your navigation easy. Don't be picking things that are super difficult to find from the cockpit seat of the airplane. So pick things prominent, easy to see. And we're going to write them down right here. So here's our chart. Here's our VFR sectional chart that we're going to be using for today. We've got the Ogden Airport right there. That's our departure airport. And we're going to be heading down here to Tooele. This is our destination airport. You can see it's a very short flight. We're not climbing very far, and we're only doing 2 quick legs. So we're going to pick a checkpoint right here. The north tip of this island. This is called Antelope Island right here. And it's very, very easy to see. I mean, if you're from Utah, you know. If you're from the Salt Lake area or you've been to the Salt Lake area, it's very easy to see. There's this giant mountain out here in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, right? It's not really in the middle of the Great Salt Lake, but it's out here. And it's a very easy thing to see. You can't miss it, especially from flight. So we picked this nice, prominent checkpoint. We're north tip of it, of Antelope Island. Okay, so let's go ahead and write those down. We got our departure airport, Ogden, Island, Tooele. We can also use the VFR sectional chart to select navigation aids that would be helpful along our route of flight. If there were navigation aids that you could use. Now, maybe you're not actively using them for your flight plan. Maybe you are, but even if you're not actively using them, still write them down on our nav log, because they can come in handy in case we get lost. If we get lost, let's write this information down. We can look at the nav log. We can be like, okay, I know that the Ogden VOR is somewhere around here. I'm going to tune in 115.7, figure out what radio I'm on, and go to the VOR, and then I'm not lost anymore. So you can still write these things down even if you're not actively using it during the flight plan. All right, so we're going to write both of these down because there's kind of two VORs that are close to along our route. Got the Ogden VOR 115.7 and the Wasatch VOR 116.8. Then we're going to plot the course. So you're going to need your plotter right here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw straight lines between the fixes and then find out what our true course is. So you're going to use your plotter. You just get the straight edge. Just draw a straight line from the departure airport to this checkpoint, and then from that checkpoint down to the destination airport. Nice straight lines between all your fixes. And you're going to do it with the plotter just like that. There you go. To determine the course headings, what we need to do is align the plotter edge with the course line drawn. You can see we've done that. We've taken our plotter right here and we've aligned it with this line that we drew from the departure airport to the checkpoint. We then need to rotate the face of the plotter. If you've ever used one of these before, you know how this works. This is the face of the plotter and this circle rotates. We're going to rotate the face of this plotter so that it parallels the quadrangle lines that are on the sectional chart. These quadrangle lines, they might be kind of hard. Oh no, you can see them really well. They're these gray lines right here, going up and down and left and right on the back of the chart. These are called our quadrangle lines. So we're going to rotate the face of this plotter so that they parallel. You can see right there where my cursor is. That's the quadrangle line on the back of the chart. And look, I have rotated it so that these arrows are paralleling that quadrangle line. They don't need to be right on top of each other per se, but they do need to parallel them. All right. The course heading is then read off the plotter face. So here we go. Rotate the plotter. We're aligning it with the chart. You can see boom, chart, boom, alignment. We've got it paralleled. And then there's our heading. Right on the face of the plotter. Now, sometimes students can get confused and because there's a heading here and there's also one over here. And it's like, well, which way are you going? Are you going southwest? Okay, then pick the southwest heading. Don't pick the northeasterly heading. Like, we're not going to be flying 050. Then we'll be flying backwards, right? So in this example, we've got a course heading of 233. And then what we would do is just repeat that process for this line right here. We would take the whole entire plotter, we would butt it up against our line, rotate the face to parallel the quadrangle lines in the back, and read the heading. Whatever that heading is, right over here. Want to continue studying this lesson? We've got two ways that you can do just that. You can do it through our website at wifiCFI.com or on our premium YouTube channel. On our website, we have private pilot to flight instructor courses that includes private pilot, instrument rating, commercial pilot, CFI, CFII, and MEI study courses filled with videos, podcasts, quizzes, check ride workbooks, practice FAA exams, downloadable check ride lesson plans for those CFI, CFII, and MEI check ride lesson plans, flight syllabi in our teaching courses, and a whole bunch more. If you only care about watching the videos and you don't care about those other study materials, you can just sign up for our YouTube premium channel, which is just the videos. We've got hundreds of training videos, again, private pilot all the way through CFI, CFII, and MEI for all topics. And all of the links for both our wifiCFI, studying this on our website, and YouTube are down in the video description below. So you can head down into that description, read about it, click the links, learn more, and we hope to see you soon again on either our website or continue studying here on YouTube.